What if the pictures of your loved ones carried more than memories, but their very essence? Many people cherish photos of those who have passed away. They keep them in picture frames, memory boxes, old albums, or even saved on their cell phones. But is there a limit to what we do with these images? Could we, without realizing it, be disrespecting the memory of these people, or even interfering with something deeper? This question, though it seems simple, has been a cause for concern in various spiritual traditions around the world. When a man named Shi Heng began answering questions about life after death, this topic resurfaced with force. Want to know how your photos might affect the departed? Smash that like button, comment, tell me more, and stay tuned. What Shi Heng revealed about the use of photos of deceased individuals drew attention because of its seriousness and the consequences he described. It's nothing like what most people imagine. For decades, Shi Heng reported that images hold more than just memories. They can contain, according to him, a kind of subtle field that still connects to the energy of the person portrayed, even after their death. This doesn't mean it's dangerous to have these photos in the house, but rather that certain uses or manipulations can open unnecessary channels, meddling with something that should already be at peace. He stated that the intention behind using the image is what defines the impact. Showing respect, love, and sincere longing is something natural, but playing around, exposing, ridiculing, or using these images for trivial purposes can, according to him, create a type of disturbance for both sides, the living and those who have passed on. There's also a practice, quite common nowadays, that deserves special attention. Many people share photos of deceased loved ones on social media, sometimes accompanied by sincere tributes, but other times just as a way to attract attention or as part of virtual chain letters. According to Shi Heng, the problem isn't the tribute itself, but the superficiality with which it's often done. He said that turning the image of someone who has already passed into an object of public and decontextualized circulation could disrupt the resting process of that soul, especially if the image generates disrespectful comments, judgments, or mockery. Respect for the memory, in this case, goes beyond intention. It also involves the context and the care taken with the exposure. In more profound accounts, Shi Heng suggested that the bond between image and spiritual energy is similar to what occurs in personal objects that were heavily used by the deceased. Just like a piece of jewelry, an article of clothing, or a handwritten letter, the photograph holds a unique vibration. He said that by handling these images lightly, people can end up reopening emotional or spiritual connections that were naturally dormant. This can generate strange sensations like intense nostalgia, disturbing dreams, or even feelings of guilt without apparent explanation. For him, this wasn't superstition, but rather the result of a subtle field of influence that still links the physical world to the spiritual one. Therefore, before posting a photo of a loved one or using it in public contexts, it's worth reflecting on the motive and the energy involved in that act. The image carries more than pixels or paper. It carries memory, energy, and, according to Shi Heng, even fragments of presence. Another important point in Shi Heng's readings is related to how these images are stored. He advised that photos of the deceased should be kept in places that convey peace, recollection, and respect, certainly not leaving them in tumultuous, messy environments or where there are frequent arguments. For him, the energy of the space directly influences the vibration of the image and, consequently, the possible connection to the memory of that person. This also includes avoiding storing these photos together with broken objects, old papers, or accumulated junk. According to Shi Heng, the energetic disorder of these environments could affect not only the memory of the deceased but also the emotional well-being of those who live there. Thus, the guidance was clear: create a small space of respect where the memory is preserved with dignity, even if silently. This would ensure that the bond remains loving but healthy. For those who have difficulty coping with grief, Shi Heng pointed out that excessive attachment to the image can become an obstacle. He wasn't saying to erase or forget loved ones, but to allow the farewell process to happen in a balanced way. When a person keeps many photos scattered around the house, looks at them several times a day, and talks to them as if the deceased were still physically present, this may indicate that something inside them is still stuck in the past. In these cases, according to Shi Heng, the continuous use of the image is no longer an emotional support, but an anchor that prevents the natural flow of life. The soul that has departed feels this attachment and, in some cases, may even remain close out of compassion, making its own process of elevation more difficult. He recommended that love be maintained, but that attachment be transformed into prayer, serene longing, and gratitude. Based on these teachings, Shi Heng reinforced that the relationship with those who have departed should always be conducted with awareness. Photography, in this context, is a delicate bridge between two realities. Therefore, he advised that when looking at an image of someone deceased, the person cultivate feelings of peace, acceptance, and gratitude, never revolt, unhealthy longing, or a desire to keep that presence tied to the physical plane. For him, the energy of the intention was directly reflected in the atmosphere of the home. That's why, incidentally, he warned that families in prolonged mourning should avoid constant gatherings around old photos as a way to fuel the pain. This didn't mean erasing history, but rather allowing the memory to occupy a noble place, not a space of continuous suffering. He said, "The best way to honor those who have departed is to live well, with dignity, and keep alive only the light they left behind." Another precaution recommended by Shi Heng was with the use of photos in amateur rituals or spiritual practices. He was clear in stating that the evocation of the deceased through images without adequate knowledge or preparation could generate undesirable consequences. According to him, not everyone is ready to open a connection with the spiritual world, and doing so without guidance can attract disharmonious energies. He compared this practice to the act of calling someone who is already on another journey and forcing them to look back. This not only delays the path of that soul, but can further confuse the feelings of those who are here. He recommended that if someone felt the need to connect spiritually with a loved one, the best way would be silent prayer, gratitude, and a sincere desire for peace for both. The photo, in this case, should only be a discreet symbol of love, not an open channel without direction. There's also a curious point that he addressed about small children who have frequent contact with photos of deceased relatives. Shi Heng said that the early years of life are marked by a very high spiritual sensitivity, and that images charged with emotion can directly influence the emotional field of these children. He wasn't saying to hide family history, but to dose the way it is presented. Telling who that person was with naturalness and affection is important, but filling the environment with images of people who have already died without explanations can cause emotional confusion or even fears without apparent reason. Shi Heng encouraged the creation of a positive but balanced memory, in which the child understands that death is part of life and that those who have departed continue to exist in another way, in peace, and that now is the time to fully live the present. Another issue that many people ignore is the use of photos of the deceased in personalized items, such as t-shirts, mugs, or souvenirs distributed at wakes and death anniversaries. Shi Heng pointed out that, although the intention is to honor, the result can be the opposite when the image is trivialized or transformed into a consumer item. For him, this disrespects the natural cycle of life and death, as it traps the person's memory in objects of daily use without the proper space for recollection. Furthermore, he viewed with concern the repeated use of these images as a way to fuel the pain or the feeling of loss, especially when there is no real purpose of healing. He suggested that one choose a single representative image which should be kept in a special place without excessive exposure. Grief for him needed to be lived with sobriety, and the image preserved with reverence, not as a symbol of absence, but as a sign of gratitude and passage. In practice, this means observing more closely how we deal with the memory of those we love. If a photo causes pain every day, perhaps it needs to be put away for a while until the heart is more serene to receive it. Shi Heng didn't propose an erasure of history, but a reconciliation with it. For him, death wasn't the end, but a transition. And like any transition, it required silence, respect, and acceptance. When we insist on holding on to someone's presence just because we don't want to say goodbye, we are, according to him, preventing the soul from following its path. The photograph, in this scenario, can become an instrument of attachment and not of remembrance. That's why he encouraged the practice of loving detachment, the one that liberates without forgetting. Keeping a photo with love is different from living attached to it. The first is healthy, the second is a burden for both. Shi Heng also spoke about dreams with loved ones, especially when these dreams came after long periods of contemplation of old photos. He said that in many cases, it wasn't just a manifestation of the subconscious, but an attempt at spiritual contact motivated by accumulated emotional energy. This wasn't in itself something negative, but rather a sign that the soul of the deceased still felt the call of the living person. If this call came from a balanced longing, the dream could be comforting, but if it came from suffering, guilt, or resistance to grief, the dream could be filled with anguish, fear, or confusion. Therefore, he reinforced before sleeping, when looking at an image of someone who has departed, it's important to mentally visualize peace. Thank them for the life shared, and wish from the bottom of the heart that this soul is free and well. This attitude, according to him, calms the bonds and harmonizes the planes. For many people, especially older ones, photos are a way to keep family history alive. They hold faces, moments, and affections that time insists on taking away. Shi Heng wasn't opposed to this. On the contrary, he valued the importance of roots, memory, and continuity between generations. What he drew attention to was the excess, the unconscious use, and the way these images were integrated into everyday life. He said that a well-kept photo can be a beacon of light, but a poorly placed photo can become a point of tension. Therefore, he encouraged that each image be seen as a link and not as an anchor. The past should inspire, not imprison. When we use photos to remember with lightness, they become bridges of affection. But when we insist on reliving the pain, they turn into mirrors of unresolved longing. The key lies in the balance between honoring the memory and living the present with fullness. This balance also involves choosing which photos to keep visible and which to store with more discretion. Shi Heng stated that there are images that carry more emotional force than others. Photos taken in moments of farewell, for example, or that refer to difficult periods of life, can keep alive an energy of suffering that, instead of comforting, reinforces sadness. He advised prioritizing cheerful images from good phases, in which the person appears alive, full, and happy. This not only preserves the memory with affection, but also contributes to the person's memory being associated with moments of light. Keeping an image isn't just an aesthetic act, it's a symbolic gesture. It's like choosing which memory we want to nurture in our mind and in our heart. According to Shi Heng, this directly impacts not only our emotional state, but also the vibration of the environment where we live. Many families maintain true altars with photos of their deceased, surrounded by candles, flowers, and prayers. For Shi Heng, this can be healthy when done with sincerity, serenity, and spiritual purpose. However, he made an important caveat. These spaces shouldn't become centers of emotional dependence. He observed that, in some cases, people start visiting these altars daily, as if they needed the constant presence of the loved one to continue living. This, he said, unbalances the grieving process and traps the departed soul in a kind of emotional influence zone from which it needs to break free. The altar, according to Shi Heng, should be a place of gratitude and of sending light, not a point of clamor or despair. When lighting a candle, one should mentally visualize liberation, peace, and continuity of life, both here and on the other side. This type of attitude strengthens the bonds of love without imprisoning anyone. With the advancement of technology, new ways of dealing with photos of those who have departed have emerged. Apps that animate static faces, simulate voices, or create videos based on old images have become popular. Although many see this as an exciting way to revive memories, Shi Heng would warn of the risks of this type of practice. According to him, artificially tampering with the image of a deceased person, trying to recreate their presence digitally, can interfere with the natural process of detachment. For Shi Heng, the soul needs to follow its path free of illusory bonds. Reviving mechanically expressions or movements of someone who has departed can be emotionally confusing, especially for more sensitive family members. The line between tribute and disturbance becomes thin when what is sought is not just to remember, but to recreate what is no longer here. Respect for the memory needs to go hand in hand with respect for the natural cycle of existence. In addition, Shi Heng drew attention to what he called the environment of permanence. It was the idea that certain images, when fixed in strategic places in the house, create an atmosphere that can influence the mood, sleep, and even the emotional health of the people who live there. He mentioned that photos of the deceased next to the bed, for example, could subtly affect the rest. This isn't for a mystical reason, but for the constant emotional evocation that these images provoke. The unconscious captures these stimuli and transforms them into recurring emotions, often difficult to identify. Thus, he suggested that strong images be positioned in places of passage, such as corridors or living rooms, where they could be seen with affection, but without occupying a space of constant centrality. Small changes in the organization of the environment can bring great emotional relief to those who are still dealing with grief. Another curious point cited by Shi Heng was about the ideal time to put away a photo of someone who has departed. He said that the time of grief is personal, but that there is a moment when the heart begins to accept, even if discreetly, the physical absence of that person. This is the moment when putting away the photo isn't forgetting, but recognizing that life needs to continue with new meanings. He suggested that this gesture be done with a small farewell ritual, a sincere prayer, words of gratitude, and the care of wrapping the image with respect as one who delivers something sacred to a safe place. For Shi Heng, storing a photo like this isn't abandonment. It's emotional maturity. The memory continues to live, but now occupies a space of lightness and not of weight. Reflecting on Shi Heng's teachings about the photos of those who have passed, I find myself deeply moved by the profound respect and sensitivity he brings to this delicate subject. His insights have stirred a quiet realization within me, prompting a re-evaluation of how I interact with the memories of loved ones who are no longer here. The idea that a photograph carries not just a visual memory, but a subtle energy, a lingering connection to the departed, feels both humbling and weighty. It's as if each image holds a piece of their essence, a sacred thread linking the physical and spiritual realms. This perspective has shifted my approach, making me more mindful of the intentions behind how I handle these cherished images. It's not just about preserving a memory, but about honoring a soul's journey, ensuring their peace and my own emotional balance. The lesson about intention resonates deeply. I've often kept photos out of habit, scattered around my home, without considering the energy they carry or the emotions they evoke. Shi Heng's guidance to treat these images with reverence, storing them in peaceful, respectful spaces and avoiding trivial uses, has made me pause. I recall a time when I left an old family photo in a cluttered drawer, surrounded by forgotten papers and broken trinkets. Now, I see how that lack of care might have subtly affected my emotional state, perhaps even stirring unrest in ways I couldn't name. His advice to create a dignified space for these memories feels like a call to bring harmony to both the living and the departed. The warning against excessive attachment struck a personal chord. I've caught myself lingering too long over certain photos, feeling a pang of sorrow that keeps me tethered to the past. Shi Heng's insight that this can anchor both my heart and the soul of the departed to unresolved grief is a gentle but firm reminder to transform longing into gratitude. I've started practicing this shift, looking at photos with a prayer of peace, thanking those I've lost for the love we shared, and wishing them freedom on their journey. This practice has brought a surprising sense of lightness, as if I'm releasing them, and myself, from unnecessary burdens. The caution about using photos in rituals or digital recreations also hit home. I once thought it might be comforting to use an app to animate an old photo of a loved one, but Shi Heng's words made me reconsider. The idea of recreating their presence artificially feels like it could disrupt the natural flow of letting go, potentially confusing my heart and theirs. Instead, I now focus on silent prayers and simple acts of remembrance, like lighting a candle with a wish for their peace. This feels more authentic, more aligned with the natural cycle of life and death. For me, the most powerful lesson is the call to live well as a way to honor those who have passed. Shi Heng's words, "The best way to honor those who have departed is to live well, with dignity, and keep alive only the light they left behind," have become a guiding principle. I've started incorporating small acts inspired by my loved ones, cooking a dish they loved, listening to their favorite song, or performing a kind gesture in their spirit. These actions keep their memory alive in a living, breathing way, not confined to a static image, but woven into the fabric of my daily life. It's a shift from clinging to the past to letting their light inspire my present. This journey of reflection has taught me that photos are more than keepsakes. They are bridges between worlds. The key is to approach them with awareness, ensuring they uplift rather than weigh down. I now ask myself, does this photo bring peace or pain? Does it inspire or paralyze? These questions guide my choices, helping me create a space where memories are cherished with love, not burden. Shi Heng's teachings have shown me that true remembrance is about living fully in the present while carrying forward the love and lessons of those who came before. It's a delicate balance, one that requires intention, respect, and a willingness to let go while holding on to what truly matters.